Greetings, everyone. This is Sangeet Grover. I'm the founding director of FuturoKnowledge. It is an organization dedicated to sustainable initiatives, education, and entrepreneurship. The objective of FuturoKnowledge is to be a catalyst in helping the SMEs to build and grow sustainable businesses and have a fully engaged workforce. The topic of today's webinar is brands and the brain. And to speak on that, we have two highly renowned and distinguished experts in the field of marketing as our panel of speakers. They will share with us great insight on the current brand marketing and behavioral science trends. The topic also generates a question in our minds. Is there a buy button inside the brain which prompts us each time we look at a brand? Or are we being sold stuff that we don't need? Let's do an exercise to see how conflict happens in our brain and how our brain fools us. I want you to read out the color of the words and not the letters on the slide that is being shown to you. Oh, where is the slide? Okay, so read the color, not the letters. Okay, so let's make it a bit more challenging. I want you to again read out the color of the words, not the letters. Okay, I know how we are feeling. Do let us know in the comments box how well you have performed. Let's now hear our speakers to understand more of how brands and the brain works. But before that, here is a reminder to the housekeeping rule. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the comments box. I will bring them up after all the speakers have finished. I now welcome our first esteemed speaker, Professor Arvind Sahai, who would share with us how the brain works, the key brain operating principles, popularly known as BOP, using BOP to engage with brands and how marketers can leverage that engagement process, some neuro tools to understand and build brands. Professor Arvind Sahai is the chairperson in the marketing area at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He joined IIM Ahmedabad in June 2004 from London Business School, where he had been teaching. His primary areas of interest include marketing strategy, pricing, neuroscience and consumer behavior, brand management, high-tech marketing, and international trade and investment. Professor Sahai has written more than 50 cases, numerous refereed articles, and have a book to his credit. Professor Sahai is the recipient of the University-wide Outstanding Dissertation Award from the University of Texas, the Innovation in Teaching Award at London Business School, and of the Devang Mehta Best Teacher Award in Marketing Management and the UTV Bloomberg Best Marketing Professor in India. He was also nominated to the Thinkers 50 India list by the Institute of Competitiveness, Harvard Business School. He is a recipient of the Phillips Morris Best Case Award in 2020. He has worked with the Working Group on Gold, established by the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and with the Niti Aayog Committee to transform gold markets. He's also the chairperson of the India Gold Policy Center at IIM Ahmedabad and is also the chairperson of the marketing area at IIM Ahmedabad. In December 2019, he was appointed as the first chairperson of the National Stock Exchange Center for Behavioral Science at IIM Ahmedabad. His second book on brands and the brain is expected to be published in 2020. Wow. Professor Sahai, it is an honor to have you here. Handing over the mic to you.
Thank you, Sangeet. I'm going to start sharing my screen now. So, Suraj, I hope everything works over here. Okay, where are we? Why is this not working?
Technical issue somewhere. Are you able to share your screen, Professor Sahai?
I'm trying. I was able to do so earlier, but right now it's not working.
That's okay. I think a bit of bloopers is acceptable.
We are still struggling here. Suraj, can you help me out here?
So,
Is this visible now to everyone?
no, there's no, we can't see the screen. In any case, I think you can start without the slide, and then probably we could share it in between.
Okay, so here goes. Now, this is an interesting way to begin where I suddenly have everyone's attention because I don't have a PPT and I'm going to be talking to you without a PPT. So let me start off by asking ourselves the question as to, when we talk about the brain and how brands reside in the brain, what is it that actually happens inside the brain? So the first thing that we need to understand is that when we are in front of or interacting with a brand that is really deeply embedded in there, then physiologically your brain actually starts behaving differently. How differently? There is a certain part of your brain which is called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, VMPFC for short. This is a very important center for emotion and affect. So when you're in front of or you're interacting with your brand that you like very much, the level of activity in this center for emotion and affect shoots up. That's only half the story. The other half of the story is that simultaneously, in another part of the brain, which is called your dorsolateral prefrontal brain, which is cortex, which is right over here, the level of activity goes down. And guess what? The DLPFC, short for dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, is the most important center for reasoning and logic in your head. So literally, physiologically, faced with a brand that you really like, faced with a brand that you love, interacting with or using a brand that you like or love, the level of emotional and affect related activity in your head goes up, and simultaneously the level of reasoning and logic in your head goes down.
Professor Sahai, I'll just intervene. Your voice is not very clear. I think you'll have to speak a little louder. Sorry
And
for this.
so in front of a brand that you like or love, therefore you are in a position where your head is telling you to behave more emotionally, more on an basis of affect, and compared to that, your reasoning abilities actually literally physiologically go down. So as a brand marketer, what do I want to do? I want to embed my brand deeply in your head, in the emotional part of your head, and even more so in the unconscious emotion part of your head, so that my brand becomes the automatic unconscious choice when you start looking at a brand for choosing, or you start looking at a brand for purposes of using or gifting. How does that happen? Why does the brain behave that way? Why is it the case that so far as a brand is concerned, a much like brand is concerned, when you have a favorite brand, your brain is literally physiologically more emotional rather than reasoning or logic based? It's because of the way our brain is wired. How is our brain wired? So there are five key brain operating principles that we think now lead to this basis of the operation in the face of brands. The first one is that we all want to be happy, literally, physiologically. What does that mean? It means more neurotransmitters. When I come back from a travel, of course, none of us have traveled for quite some time, but we come back from travel, your kid gives you a hug and you feel happy. What is happening? The level of oxytocin in your head is going up. Your boss says, hey, you've done really well. Of course, he doesn't say that every day, does he? But when he does, your dopamine levels shoot up and you feel happy. So our brain is always looking for these neurotransmitters: dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, serotonin, acetylcholine, and so on. And when they go up, we feel good. And our brain's objective is to get more of these neurotransmitters. The brand that gives us more of these neurotransmitters, whether dopamine or acetylcholine or oxytocin, is the one that we will want to go with. Maggie, for example, as a brand in India, is the one that probably gives you the maximum spike of dopamine and oxytocin, though you may not know it. Why does it give you oxytocin? Because you grew up with Maggie. Your mom gave it to you. when you came back from play, when you were hungry, you cooked Maggie at college, when you were preparing with your friends, or when you were hanging out with friends. So lots of fond memories mixed with your brain in your memories, and all of them give you a spike of oxytocin. That's one of the reasons why you love Maggie. That's one of the reasons why when Maggie went off the shelves for 4 months in 2015, the entire category contracted by 50%, despite the fact that alternatives were available. So brain operating principle number one is that you need to have a brand that gives you these spikes of the desired neurotransmitters in the brain. The second one is even more interesting. Our brain is an energy conserver. Think about your head. 1500 cc of space, 1.5 kilograms of gray matter stuffed in that space, consuming 25% of the energy that you consume. 25%, equivalent of a 60-watt bulb that's sitting inside your head. 60-watt bulbs are pretty hot. I don't know whether you ever touched a bulb. That's pretty hot. But your brain doesn't get hot, does it? Otherwise, you literally would have a case of bheja fry. Why doesn't it get hot? Because it conserves energy very ferociously to maintain the homeostasis. And how does it conserve energy? It tries to avoid doing stuff that consumes energy. What is the most energy intensive activity that your brain does? It's what some of you guys are trying to do right now, right? Which is to pay attention to what I'm saying. Deliberate conscious attention and thinking. The brain tends to push stuff into the unconscious, into automatic mode all the time. That's the way we are wired. We are wired to function on an energy saving mode, which is unconscious automatic action. So that's the brain operating principle number two: conserve energy, push stuff into the unconscious, which is why you want your brand in the unconscious of your customer. The deeper it is embedded into the unconscious of the customer, the less the customer is going to think when it comes to choosing your brand or using you. You become an automatic choice. That is what you want. In fact, that is marketing nirvana, right? If I have become the automatic choice, I don't even have to think. The customer is not going to think when they're going to choose a brand in that category. So therefore, if I can do that, I am in marketing nirvana. You could argue, for example, that brands like Marlboro or BMW or Maggie or Lifebuoy are in that category. Even Dove, to a certain extent, has reached in that category. These are unconscious automatic choices. So brain operating to principle number two: make your brand the unconscious automatic choice arising out of the energy conservation need of the brand of the brain. And the third and fourth ones are the most interesting from an action perspective, what we need to do as a marketer. The third one is that our brain is wired to look for patterns, to see groups, to see categories. You walk into a room, you see a bunch of people, you're already categorizing them. You go to a new place, you're categorizing and grouping the place. This is this kind of place. I've seen this somewhere before. And that's what it looks for in brands also. It wants to put brands in particular categories. This brand belongs to this category. Interestingly, at the same time, the brain also looks for contrasts. It likes contrasts. So familiarity and contrast, categories and differences. The categories gives the brain serotonin, brain operating principle number one. The contrast gives dopamine. And our brain is consistently looking at this dopamine, serotonin, and of course the others: acetylcholine, oxytocin, vasopressin. And the right differences gives the brain more dopamine, more serotonin, and therefore a more preferred brand. It's one of the reasons why the most successful brands are the ones which are able to give us these spikes on an ongoing basis. In India, for example, you've got this brand called Amul, right? Amul has one of the longest running brand campaigns ever in the history of this country, where you have this little polka dotted girl who comes up with spoofs on contemporary events all the time. The polka dotted girl has been around for 60 years, very familiar. I can immediately categorize her. Yes, this is Amol. I feel comforted. I feel this is familiar. My serotonin levels go up. And as soon as she breaks into the latest spoof, it might be on whatever has happened yesterday on Corona, it might be on some political event, and suddenly you think, oh my, that's an interesting thing. I remember my friend talking about it or reading about it online, and that gives me a small spike of dopamine. So brands which are able to consistently continue to provide me these small spikes of dopamine and serotonin are the ones which are going to be there in my brain, are the ones which are going to become unconsciously embedded in my brain, are the ones which are going to be leading to a higher level of emotion spiking in my head. And the last brain operating principle, number five, of course, is the whole idea of mirror neurons. which flows from very early on, about almost 30 years ago now, when we had this gentleman called Rizzolatti sitting in a lab in Italy, and he had these two monkeys sitting on two ends of the lab. One end of the lab was a monkey with his head open, and some electrodes stuck in the F5 area of his head. And at the other end was the other monkey. And Rizzolatti came in, Dr. Rizzolatti came in, and he gave a banana to this other monkey sitting in the other corner, and that monkey started eating the banana. As this monkey was eating the banana, the first monkey sitting in the other corner with the head open, his neurons in the F5 area started firing. He's just watching the other chap eat the banana, and his neurons are firing the same neurons that the other monkey is using to eat the banana. And so that was the first instance that we came to know that you have these so-called mirror neurons. We mirror the activities of entities outside us. Of course, this starts off in primates, but today we know that an equivalent kind of system tends to exist in human beings as well. We call it the mirror neuron system. So the most powerful brands are the ones also which kind of leverage this tendency of the human brain to imitate others. Of course, we see this in many different areas of life, not just in brands. We see it in the financial markets, we see it in politics, we see it in sports, so many different areas. But it has a very powerful impact in terms of brands, because the brand which is therefore able to use influencers, for example, better. And this is one of the reasons that influencer marketing works, because there are a lot of people who want to mirror what that influencer is doing. And that is how influencer marketing works. So you take all of these five together, the need for the brain to conserve energy, the need for the brain to get these neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, vasopressin, and so on, the need for the brain to create patterns, to look for patterns, and also have contrast at the same time, and the last one, mirror neurons. You take these together and you suddenly have a set of ideas that you can straight away then apply to get a sense of, okay, this is the brand that I want to create. This is the brand that is able to leverage all these five principles to get into the head of the customer and create a situation where physiologically the customer's emotion centers are much more active as compared to his reason and logic centers. And therefore, the greater the emotional engagement at the end of the day, the greater is the level of how the customer is going to interact with and like and buy the brand and use the brand and become a loyal customer, which at the end of the day is what we as marketing professionals would want for a brand. So what is the level of use of neuroscience in brands so far as of today? So many large companies now have started using this quite well. And the key tools that we use in these areas, I'll describe three of them very briefly to you guys. One is called the eye tracker. The second is the EEG, electroencephalograph, and the third is fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. Two out of these three, eye tracker and EEG, now we have at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, here at our behavioral science lab. And we are beginning to now do our own research and experiments in the lab over here. I'd welcome any of you who is in this part of the world to come and visit us at the lab. The gold standard, of course, is the fMRI, wherein you can actually see deep inside the head and figure out which part of the brain is working in the face of a stimuli. So I can put two brands in front of you and see which brand excites your anterior ancilla more, or which brand excites your nucleus accumbens more. Nucleus accumbens is an area of your head which becomes more active when you're anticipating a gain. So if you really like a brand and I put it in front of you and you allow me to put you inside the fMRI, there is a 99.9% chance that your nucleus accumbens will spike in its activity. And I will be able to say with that much certainty that you're going to like this brand quite a bit. On the other hand, if your anterior insula spikes, then that means you're feeling a sense of risk in going for this brand and choosing this brand. And there needs to be some change in the brand. So now we have reached a stage where there is a substantial amount of science being put behind the examination of how the brains of potential and existing customers react to what is going on with the brand in front, what is happening inside the head. And based on that, one can actually design interventions. So for example, if my lab tells me, the equipment, EEG or fMRI or eye tracker tells me, this is the feature of my product or packaging that is actually leading to a sense of anticipation, I will make sure that I highlight those features much more. Similarly, I can capture these activities of the brains so far as the consumer experience of the brand is concerned. The EEG, for example, it comes as a cap with electrodes. You can actually wear it as a hat, and you can go around. And for a period of 3 or 4 hours, I can monitor what you are doing while you're using a brand, and I can then construct a fairly elaborate brain map of the activity of the brain as you're using a liked brand versus a not liked brand. And these are extremely helpful in then being able to design the brand itself, the design of the brand, the packaging, and also the experiences around the brand, which ultimately are what lead to, in the long run, a brand which becomes deeply embedded in the unconscious. Just to summarize briefly, therefore, what we want to be talking about, the first key idea, so far as the brands are concerned, is that our brains are where our brands reside. And our brains work on the basis of 5 principles, what we call as the brain operating principles. The first principle is that our brain wants these neurotransmitters. Whichever brand gives them the neurotransmitter, that's the one that will work. The brain wants to conserve energy. Whichever brand leads to a lesser consumption of energy, that is the brand that will be preferred. The brain wants to see patterns, familiarity, comfort in brands. So whichever brand is able to give those will be the one which will be ahead. Simultaneously and very interestingly, the brain wants contrast. So even with a familiar brand, I want a little bit of excitement, which is the reason we get bored. So item number 4, brain operating principle number 4, we want to have that spike of excitement, the difference, the contrast, which gives us dopamine. And last, of course, if other people, especially influencers, are using the brand, then I'm much more likely to use this brand. So if I can design my actions around these, then I will reach a place where my brand is actually going to be emotionally engaged with you. And the more deeply it is emotionally engaged with you, the more deeply my brand is embedded in your unconscious, emotional unconscious, the better off I am. I will have reached marketing nirvana. Where are we in terms of usage of these neuroscience-based principles in the application of brands in the brain? We are now in a place where there are equipment available like the EEG, the eye tracker, the fMRI, the transcranial magnetic stimulation simulator. And we have one lab in our own place at IIM Ahmedabad, which are now increasingly being used, not just for academic research, but by companies as well. Globally, companies like Unilever, P&G, BMW. In India, companies also like Ghadi Detergent Bar, Maruti, Unilever are using these principles in constructing and delivering their brands. So let me close on that note and hand over to Manish. Over to you, Manish. Thanks a lot, Sangeet.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Dr. Sahai, for sharing your research on this topic. Really appreciate that. May I request you, I know you've summarized very well, but may I request you to highlight a couple of takeaways for the convenience of the audience, please?
You asked me.
Yes, please. Yes, Professor Sahai. I know you've summarized very well, but just two or three important takeaways for the audience.
So I would kind of build on what I've already said and say that if you are, for example, a brand marketer, this is a good time to start investing in this new area. The future of consumer behavior, I would argue to you, is in this area as we are starting to bring to where some of the science behind how the brain works to be able to build and construct and build experiences for the customer around brands. The second thing is that as you make this transition, the interesting thing that one is finding about companies that are making this transition is that it's not a substitute, it's kind of a supplement to the existing traditional ways of doing marketing, but it's an important one. And it is important to build up the capabilities within the firms to do that, because right now the capability is somewhat limited. I remember and there's some amount of snake oil salesmanship also going around in this area, because I remember once an equipment vendor had come to me to try and sell me a piece of equipment around the program that I do on neuroscience and marketing. And he ended up sitting and attending all my 3 days of sessions on the program because the guy didn't know half of the stuff that he was trying to sell to me. While I think there is great potential, a lot of companies are actually making great progress in this area, but one has to proceed with a certain amount of caution, and one does not want the same fate to befall this area as has happened in other areas of marketing research. Marketing research often gets a bum rap because people don't do good marketing research, and they get to use some, pardon my French, they get crap results and then they take wrong actions based on the crap results and then they blame the marketing research. So I would not want that to fate to befall this area, because one way or the other it's going to happen. More and more you will see the application of our understanding of brands to the building and maintenance of brands. Uh, Having said that, it requires careful application, and careful application will then make sure that it happens sooner. If we, on the other hand, get into a situation where there is a lack of careful application, then it will get delayed. So, for those of the audience who are kind of considering this or are looking at this, I would urge you to make haste with caution.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Professor Sahai. And now it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our next honorable speaker, Mr. Manish Advani. Manish, also known as the Coconut Man of India, is a 7-time TEDx speaker and an award storyteller and sustainability campaigner. He's a brand consultant, an award-winning storyteller, sustainability campaigner, and a global Goodwill ambassador. Manish's work has won the International Green Apple Award for India at the House of Commons in the British Parliament, won the Scotch Blue Economy Silver Award, Public Relations Council of India Silver Award, the Leadership Review Award, Neetis on the Job Achievers Award, and his work has been listed in the Limca Book of Record. Manish was sponsored for the Filmmaking for Social Good program by the US Consulate. He has been listed as a top 100 storytellers of India and top 100 influential marketing. I just need to put the charger on. Marketing leaders of India. His sessions have been well received in organizations like the Indian Space Research Organization, that's ISRO, Confederation of Indian Industry, Larsen and Toubro, Johnson and Johnson, Barclays, Zycus, IIMs, IITs, and many more. Our second distinguished speaker, Mr. Manish Advani, would now share with us the relationship between the stories and the brain and steps of using stories in brand engagement process, and give a few tips on how individuals and corporates can evolve using stories. The stage is all yours, Manish. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sangeet, for the kind of nice introduction. Thank you so much, Professor Saib, for giving insights on how the brain functions and how the 5 brain operating procedures work. And I would, being a storyteller, I'll won't be going too much into technical, but I'll try to do this session using a story. So I'll take you 73 years back, the way my grandmother used to take me back. My grandmother migrated from Pakistan, Karachi in Pakistan. So 73 years ago, during the India-Pakistan partition, my grandmother used to say, they used to live a very luxurious life in Karachi. They had car in those days was a big luxury, and it was something which very few people had. So they were living a life of royalty. So everything they wanted was there. And all of a sudden, they were faced with a situation that within few minutes, they had to take a decision to leave everything behind. It was actually worse than what we are experiencing in, the current times of lockdowns and unlock version 1, 2, 3, where people are feeling frustrated, crores of people are losing jobs. But here, the matter was not much beyond jobs. It was losing your home, losing your job, and you might even lose your life. So in such kind of state, they decided in few hours, they took a very big decision. They had to leave everything behind. And my grandfather boarded the last ship, which took off from Karachi to Bombay. That time, today now it's known as Mumbai. So after coming here, they were living and refugee colony, and all of a sudden the life from riches turned into rags. My grandfather and my grandmother and all the children she had were, I mean, living on basically on roti and bananas, and that's how actually they survived for quite some time. And she used to, when she used to talk about these stories, I mean, she used to always, at the same, while she used to narrate these stories, she was also give me a horrifying picture of people in Pakistan. She would say, they raped women, they threw children from their balconies, and millions of people got killed on the way, and there was a lot of bloodshed. And these visuals would play in my mind, although didn't experience myself, the actual situation, but I could feel it. I could see the visuals, and when she would describe, and then this is something which got registered in my mind. I mean, we have, I believe, Professor Sahay is expert in this, the temporal cortex, and then we have the hippocampus, which stores the episode. They make memories, and I think that indexing which is done in the brain. This is something got indexed in my brain that people who live in Pakistan are bad. And anything, if in an India and Pakistan cricket match, if Pakistan lost, I used to be very happy. I think Professor Sai mentioned those neurons and other things would take off in my brain. But suddenly things changed with one ad. I mean, I would request our friend to play that ad. This is an ad which was made by Google. A 3-minute ad actually changed my perception. I would love, I would like all of you to see this ad.
Can't hear this.
So it's a beautiful reunion ad of Google in which they show, how two friends got separated because of the India-Pakistan divide. And, this ad made me rethink about my perception. So, I began to think, if one tall man does something wrong, you cannot actually categorize that all tall men are bad. So it made me rethink, it made me feel the emotions which these two gentlemen were sharing in this video. And lastly, because of the thinking and feeling process, I was willing to change my mindset. I was willing to change my perception, and this story played a big role in changing that perception. So there was one story which I heard in Bahubali. Also, we see the famous movie which was a blockbuster. The mother who loves her child, who wanted her, the was child to be the king. She gets her killed because she hears the wrong story. So stories are very powerful. They have a huge impact on the brain. We actually take a lot of decisions in our life based on the stories we hear on day-to-day basis. And I feel when I look at the education system, a lot of educationists whom I meet, I always tell them, I believe storytelling should be taught throughout the life. I mean, throughout one's life. Because stories teller and the artist which is there within each one of us, I believe we leave these two friends behind when we are in 5th or 6th grade. And these two friends, I mean, artist and a storyteller form the basis of design thinking, because design thinking's two pillars are art and stories. If you are not able to visualize problems, how will we be able to come up with right solutions to these problems? And I feel even maths, I mean, for if we see when we are kids, I mean, we learn maths through stories. Ram had 5 apples, he gave away 3 apples, and how many was he left with? The basic of math is taught through stories. But unfortunately, we leave these two friends behind. And if we reignite these two friends, we can experience wonders in our life. I mean, I come across many problems in different organizations. I mean, so in the learnings and development departments, heads, I mean, many heads, they tell me good amount of learning is happening in our organization, but the challenge is with development. And many a times they talk about retention. We have big amount of problem retaining what people learn. I mean, they have like hundreds and hundreds and hours, hundreds hours of programs. But the challenge is people are not able to retain what they're learning. And the only question I ask them, are you simplifying learning using art and stories? We have all heard picture speaks 1,000 words and storytelling is an art. And both are lethal combinations. And if we combine, I mean, why don't we bring stories and art and learning? Social media policy, a lot of people are talking about cybercrime, so many things which are happening and impacting brands in big way. If we are, I mean, technical concepts which are part of those cyber security policies or information risk, which are social engineering and confidentiality, integrity, so many things which are there. I mean, for a common man, these will be like bouncers. These would be like different kind of missiles which are coming on them. I mean, we can simplify these things through stories. I don't think there is almost everything which I believe can be taught using art and stories. And in fact, irrespective of which religion people follow, I mean, we all grew up, listening to stories. People, millions of people go to Mecca, Medina because they hear some stories, or it's based on stories that they want to go. They have that deep desire to go. Crores of people or millions of people go to Kumbh Mela because they have heard those stories which have a deep impact in them. So like that, I mean, there is a tree of life in the kingdom of Bahrain. I mean, when I was in Bahrain, somebody said, "Oh, this is a tourist spot," and I was thinking, what is that? What is so great about a tree? I mean, there are trees all around Bahrain. I see many trees, but what is so special about this tree, which is known as the tree of life? And thousands of visitors go and take selfies with tree of life in Bahrain. And when I heard the story that this is the only tree which has survived 200 years, I mean, 200 years ago, there was no tree, there was only desert. And this tree gave shade, that gave shelter to so many travelers who were passing by this tree in the desert. And because of that, it's known as tree of life. It's a life-giving tree, and still, till date, it's standing still. So such is the power. I mean, to see a tree, I mean, when the people hear a story around the tree, thousands of people, just go and take selfies with the tree. So that's the power of story. So even in the world of brands, I mean, brands which have, leveraged on powerful stories. I mean, those stories are still fresh in our mind if we, heard that story even 20 years ago. So stories are integral part of our life, and they are deeply connected, rooted in our, with our, I mean, connected with our brain, and it works with the process of thinking. We think about certain things using a story, we visualize, and then we feel that again through a story, and then we are willing to make a decision based on the lesson or based on the call to action we get from a story. So that would be my 2 cent advice on, 2 cent thoughts on stories in the brain. So thank you for being a wonderful audience.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Advani, for such an insightful share. It has definitely been highly rewarding for me personally. Like I asked Professor Sahai, can you just give us a couple of takeaways for the convenience of the audience?
Sure.
Please?
So my biggest takeaway would be, I mean, the takeaway for you would be, reignite the artist and the storyteller within you, and how you can do that, because these stories are at every step. Every experience you have is a story. You have experience with the person who delivers milk at your home. You can write a story, based on the experience you have had, positive, negative, or the learnings which you have got. And for that, I mean, I feel, many people ask me, how should I, be a storyteller? And I feel, to be a storyteller, you have to evolve from hearing to listening. That's something which is much needed, and unfortunately listening in today's age is becoming a forgotten skill. And if you can, focus on that, I mean, for, being a good listener, you have to go beneath the surface, and then you will be able to see stories at every step. When I was a child, I mean, there used to be a famous ad. I'm not sure, Sangeet, if you remember, there used to be an ad of Garden. They used to sell saris, and there used to be a woman in the ad who used to say, "Catch me if you can." So stories are like that. So they are everywhere, all around us. We have to, learn the art of catching them. And I think if you are able to catch them, I mean, you will have wonderful experiences at every step in your life.
I'm sure. Yes. Thank you so much, Manish. And my dear audience, time for Q&A session. And I'm looking at the questions. The first question is from Dr. Chabi Sinha. She's from MIT College of Management. And this question is for you, Manish. How will brands evolve during the pandemic?
So during the pandemic, the biggest, I mean, thing is, I mean, this is a different kind of pandemic which has, kind of impacted everybody in the world. I haven't come across anyone, whether it's a yogi or it's a rogi or anyone on the planet. I haven't come across any individual who says, I haven't been impacted by coronavirus. So in this kind of situation, everybody is experiencing some kind of pain, inconvenience, and there is great need for positivity. And there are various ways. I mean, we see these days, I mean, so many sites which have come up, Better India, Your Story, and in these sites, I mean, promote good amount of, positive news, positive experiences which people are having. So how brands can evolve in current situation, I'm not sure if people have seen the ad of Tata Steel. A few years ago, Tata Steel came up with an ad in which they showed two set of people. One was elders and another was young children. So what they did, they got these two groups in one room. First, they got the elders in that room. They gave them certain set of colors to make the artwork which they wanted to make, whatever came to their mind. And elders made all possible kind of paintings, beautiful paintings, and they kind of, posted the paintings all around the room. After they were done, they invited the young kids to do the same exercise. So the paintings which elders had painted were all colorful. And when the kids came in, when the turn of the kids, came, when the kids started painting, whatever they painted was black and white. And somebody asked, the kids, I mean, the elders only asked the kids after, both of them got in the same room. Elders asked the kids, my dear children, why have you painted everything black and white? So the kids tell the elders, uncle, aunties, you haven't left any colors for us.
Oh my God.
So the thing is, I mean, ads like which kind of ignite call to action. These are the ads which are need of the hour, and these are the ads which will make people rethink. Because in current times, it's not about restarting. It's about people are actually going through a reset phase. Yes. It's not stop, pause, and restart. It's actually reset. People are rethinking about life. I mean, there are many people who have come across. They're rethinking about life. Earlier, it was they used to have things which were good to have, nice to have. Now, because of the essential and non-essential, people, most of the population is only focused on, must-have. These are the must-have things, and I'll only focus on those. So in that kind of situation, call to action ads work better rather than ads. I mean, adding to an ad, it would be call to action or a purpose in that ad. Coca-Cola is another good company which is doing a lot of work on this front. So they are promoting the concept of, that every liter of water they consume, they replenish it. So just imagine, I mean, in a big way, I mean, in India, so many, I mean, if you have to create, if I was a Coca-Cola, if I have to create a story which I want to go viral, what I would do is, we have at one end, we have Brahmaputra, where, a lot of water goes in the sea. I'll tell, hey, Coca-Cola, why don't you, use the water from Brahmaputra, because a lot of water in anyways is going to go to the sea, and replenish it in the place like Vidarbha. And if you do that, the story which you'll create, I guarantee that will go viral. 100% it will go viral, whether it's pandemic or it's not pandemic.
Yes. So thank you, Manish. And we have a question for Professor Sahai from Priyanka Vyas. How does BOP help in engaging with the movie's target customers? Professor Sahai, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so movies are stories, right? The best movies have the best stories. And therefore, the best stories are the best patterns, essentially. And the best patterns are the ones which will engage my brain on all those five elements. It will give me some nice dollops of dopamine, make me feel excited. It will give me some nice dollops of oxytocin and vasopressin, make me feel good because there's a lot of family feeling or friends getting together that I can identify with. It will make me feel familiar at the same time that it is different. Bahubali is a perfect example. There is a familiarity because there is a pattern to the story. I can recognize that story. The difference is in the way that it is executed. That's the first time that you have VFX at that level of technological excellence being shown on the Indian screen in Indian language that really pushes out the envelope, and that contrast really turns on my brain. And then the issue of how they manage the influencer marketing, the mirror neuron system, where they are building up the anticipation by saying, what happened to why did Katappa kill Bahubali, for the second one, as they build up the anticipation.
Yeah.
So that's the influencer marketing where they're getting people to talk about it. So in a very real sense, brain operating principles are fundamental to human behavior. I'm a marketing professor, so I'm applying it in the context of brands and in the context of marketing. But actually, you can take these and apply it in the context of leadership. You can take it and apply it in the context of packaging. You can take it and apply it in the context of group dynamics. There are so many different places because ultimately, the brain is the common element across all those contexts. When I'm interacting in a group, I do better in the interaction in a group when I'm able to get those right elements of dopamine, serotonin in the person that I'm interacting with compared to when I'm not. Same way, that same thing applies to brands. The same thing applies to movies as well. Movies are simply a way of or a context in which the brain operating principles are applied. Now, the interesting thing is that the best movies are the ones which are able to therefore combine these different elements, and those are the ones which will get either box office acclaim or critical acclaim or a combination of both, because at some level it will appeal to both the segments, either the critic segments or the mass segment or both of them, because the brains of both of these people, based on that story, and equally importantly the execution of that story, how that creative element is then executed in the movie, right? In Bahubali, for example, the execution, the one of the key parts of the execution is the VFX effects that make it what it is, right? The first time you watch it, you get blown away, but by the fourth or fifth time that you watch it, you are no longer feeling as good about it, which may not have been true for other movies. So that story has to have also something new in some ways if you want to have a good, powerful movie. Uh, I actually remember talking to the producer of Bahubali, and one of the things, so he had come on campus at Ahmedabad, And I remember asking him, so what was it that motivated you to create this movie, and how did you then actually get that execution in a particular way? So he told me something which is very interesting, which ties in very perfectly with what Manish has been sharing with us. Uh, that he had actually created and visualized that story in his mind completely, and then he had checked and got feedback on that story in his mind with a certain number of people, which gave him the confidence that it might actually work. Because I don't know how many of you guys are aware of that particular movie. It took for ages, and it cost a real packet to make that movie. And no, not just that, there were a bunch of fairly well known actors who committed almost 3 years of their life to that movie, where they were pretty much not doing anything but shooting for that movie. So, not only was it a powerful story using the brain operating principles that we talked about, but also he was able to sell that story not just to us, you and me as a movie audience, but also to the actors who acted in that movie. This is a story worth spending 3 years of your life for.
Very good. Yeah. So thank you, Professor Sahai. We have a question from Amit Sugandhi for Manish. Can someone use these concepts to build their personal brands and influence others through direct or indirect communications? You'll have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Yes, so I did unmute. Yes, so these concepts work. I mean, these concepts do work. I mean, recently Nike shared an ad in which they showed, multiple athletes and sports personalities from different parts of the world, and that was a beautiful ad which was created, showcasing, that how we are going to be back, how we are going to bounce back while cities are getting unlocked, going through the unlocking phase. So it works. I mean, these concepts, and these are age-old, tried and tested concepts. It's not something which is new. These are age-old concepts, and it works. It tried and tested, and you don't have to try them. I mean, if I ask you a question, it's a question which will answer your question. So my question to you is, what comes to your mind if I say, think about crow sitting on a jar?
Crow sitting on a, sorry?
So Sangeet, would you like to? Crow sitting on a jar. What comes to your mind?
He's going to drink water from the jar.
So thirsty crow, right? But what did you see first in the mind? Okay. Did you see the text or did you see the visual?
I saw the visual, the crow sitting like this on the jar.
Yes.
The jar.
Yes. So you visualize that, right? Now, my next question is, when did you hear this story? Because you said he's looking for water. when did you hear this story?
I must be, 5 or 6 years old when I heard this story.
6 years old, and you still remember that story, right? Now my next question is, I mean, do you remember the algorithm you solved in 8th grade? Nothing against mathematicians, but just a question,
No way, I don't remember at all.
So that is the power of stories. I mean, it's in the world of mathematics, 1 plus 1 is 2, but in the world of stories, 1 plus 1 can be 11. That's the power. It's limitless. I mean, the Bahubali, I mean, Professor Sahay talked about Bahubali. I mean, in reality, is Bahubali possible? Answer is no. But we all watched it because it was something different. It was beautiful. The VFX effects, best in the world. First time in India, it actually, I mean, it was an amazing movie that way. But in reality, is it possible? No. So that's the power of stories. I mean, you can leverage on. I mean, when Bahubali can become a blockbuster on a story, which is never possible in the real world, why cannot your real story help you influence others? Probably leveraging whatever communication channels you're using in the world of social media.
So in the end, we all must work towards building our own stories, rather than.
So for that, I mean, my suggestion would be to visualize. You're on your deathbed, and while on your deathbed, make a list of things which you wanted to do and you weren't able to do. So Sushant Singh, I mean, is being in the news for quite some time. In fact, his list of 50 things he wanted to do was tweeted by many people.
Extremely
So,
sad.
so make that list and, reverse engineer, I'll start working on those, and don't work it based on text. Make visuals of every line item which is in the list. Keep that
And
visual at a place where you can see that every single day. And the
yes,
law of attraction, how it works is you will actually start moving in that direction. You'll start taking those steps, and you won't, based on my experience, I would tell you, don't be surprised if many people join you in that journey and make it or take it to a very different level. I mean, I strongly believe in the Hindi dialogue. I mean, I'm not sure how many of you have heard this. There's a famous dialogue which is, हम निकल पड़े थे अकेले लोग जुड़ते गए और देखते ही देखते कारवां बन गया.
yes,
So that is the power of stories.
yes, yes. लोग जुड़ते गए, कारवां बढ़ता गया. Very nice. Okay, thank you, Manish. Interesting to hear you. Okay, we have a question from Mr. Pramod Jain for Professor Sahai. Has core focus of branding shifted from the trust on quality and price to mostly marketing? And if so, then will such brands and branding itself will survive for long?
So, Pramod, the key to branding ultimately is that a brand is nothing but a feeling, an emotion, a set of neurons firing in your head. You can call it whatever you want, you can call it based on whatever you want, but so long as human beings are around and 100 billion neurons are functioning in their heads, brands will exist in some form or the other. They have existed from the time of our recorded history in Babylon and Indus Valley civilization. You had brands at that time. You have brands today. Uh, and brands depend on many different things to get embedded inside your head, right? So a brand like Maruti Suzuki, for example, right? Why is it embedded in your head? Because it provides a particular kind of quality, reliability, consistency at a particular price. It no longer needs, and by when you say marketing, I'm assuming you mean selling. It no longer needs the kind of selling that it used to earlier, for the reason that over the years, the kind of quality and price that it provides, the combination is almost unbeatable by anybody else. And over a period of time, that particular combination has got embedded as a feeling in the head, as a summary experience in the head of millions and millions of people, which is one of the reasons why Maruti Suzuki continues as the brand at the lower end of the market for inexpensive, reliable cars which have a good service network and have a good resale value. Interestingly, what is more interesting is that because that's such a powerful set of neuronal connections in your head, when you want to buy a more expensive car, right, you do not think of buying a Maruti Suzuki, because in your head has categorized Maruti Suzuki as an inexpensive small car which is reliable. Your head has a difficult time wrapping itself around the idea that Maruti Suzuki can actually sell you expensive cars, top of the line cars. So when you want to buy an expensive car, you buy something else. It might be a BMW, it might be a Kizashi, whatever. So that is the power of a brand, regardless of whether you sell or not. A brand, if it is a good thing, if it means something to the customer, if it provides some benefit to the customer, the benefit can be in many different dimensions. It can make the person feel good. A lot of people eat Maggie because it makes them feel good. Why does it make them feel good? Because every time they eat Maggie, some of the oxytocin and vasopressin that's associated with those earlier events, when their mom gave it to them and when they had it with their friends, that's spiking in their heads, so they feel good. So that's it, it's their comfort good. The brand is a comfort that is being provided. The brand is the comfort that is being provided by that product. It doesn't need much selling anymore. Yes, a little bit of reminding, but that feeling already exists in the head. And so therefore, will brands survive for long? I think so long as human beings are around, brands will always survive, because there's going to be a story to be told around brands. And as so long as human beings have a need to connect with something, there will always be brands around. And our brains, by the way, are wired to connect, right? We are wired to connect. Mostly we connect to people, or at least we used to connect to people. Nowadays, we also connect to machines. We also connect to our telephones, our mobile phones. You could always, or you could almost argue that this need for connection of the brain will also keep the brands alive. Of course, the interesting thing is that earlier we used to connect to people, so we loved people and we used brands. Now maybe we love brands and we use people.
Thank you, Professor Sahai. It's really an honor to have you and Manish on this platform. We're running out of time. I would also like to thank the Future Knowledge team who makes these webinars possible. Mr. Suraj Mantri, the backbone and the co-founder of Future Knowledge. Ms. Anupriya Iyer, one of our most conscientious team members, who tirelessly works as our relationship manager, and Hardit Singh Grover, our brilliant creative director. Thank you all for such overwhelming participation. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on our Facebook and Instagram to stay connected for many such remarkable speakers. And please do share your preferred topics in the comment section, which you would like to be covered in our upcoming webinars. God bless. Rab Rakha. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
Thank you, Sangeet. Thank you, Manish.
you.